The boots struck the dirt in unison, a drumbeat of discipline echoing across the training field. Heat rose off the ground in waves, carrying the sharp scent of sweat and dust. And above it all came the rasping bark of a drill instructor's voice, tearing through the silence of dawn. Recruits stumbled, sprinted, strained beneath the weight of packs and rifles, each one desperate not to falter under the merciless gaze fixed upon them. And in the midst of that sea of khaki and green, she stood out not because of what she had done, but because of what they believed she could not do. Her frame was small, her shoulders narrower than the men towering beside her, her hands delicate against the coarse grip of the rifle. To some, she looked like a child who had wandered into a battlefield. The laughter began almost as soon as the training cycle started. A whisper here, a smirk there, growing louder until it reached a chorus of disbelief. She won't last a week. Give it a day, she'd be begging to go home. Even the instructor's eyes narrowed, not with cruelty, but with the practiced judgment of a man who had seen hundreds break before they even began. He said nothing at first, letting the sneers of her fellow recruits cut deeper than any insult he might deliver. She heard it all, every chuckle, every muttered bet against her, and though her lips never parted, her silence was not weakness. Inside, something burned hotter than the rising sun, a private fire that would not allow her to retreat. Her jaw tightened as she adjusted the strap digging into her shoulder. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. The first test came quickly, the run. Packs buckled to backs, rifles slapping against spines, the recruits lined up in ragged formation. The command broke the air like a gunshot, and they surged forward. Dust clouded behind them, breath came in harsh gasps, and the rhythm of boots striking earth set the tempo of their pain. She ran at the edge of the group, her steps quick and measured, her body fighting to keep pace with strides twice the length of her own. A boy on her left glanced down, grinned, and muttered, "Try not to trip, little one." He sped ahead, leaving her in the churn of dust. Her lungs burned, the pack cut into her shoulders, but she forced her legs to move faster. The laughter that had stung her ears at the start seemed to fade behind the thunder of her heartbeat. When the finish line came into sight, she gritted her teeth and drove forward. She didn't come first, not even close. But she didn't come last either, and that alone silenced some of the grins. The instructor marked her name, his expression unreadable. For a flicker of a moment, his eyes lingered, as if considering something he hadn't expected. Then his voice cracked through the air again, pushing them toward the next trial dot. It was the obstacle course that nearly broke her. Walls loomed high. Ropes swung heavy. Mud sucked at boots and hands. One by one, the recruits hurled themselves forward, clambering, leaping, dragging their bodies toward the finish. When her turn came, the laughter rose again, eager, expectant. The first wall was taller than her reach, the wood slick with the handprints of those before her. She leapt, fingers brushing the edge, but not grasping it. She fell back, boots sinking into the mud. A voice from behind laughed loud enough for all to hear. "Told you too small." She stared at the wall, breath ragged, hands trembling. Then she crouched low, sprang again, and this time her fingers hooked over the edge. Her body dangled, her muscles screaming, but she refused to let go. Inch by inch, she hauled herself upward, her chin scraping over the top until at last she pulled, her body across. She collapsed for a moment, chest heaving, before rising and running toward the next challenge. The laughter had dulled now, replaced by murmurs, some mocking still, but others quieter, almost reluctant. The rope climb left blood on her palms. Her small hands slipped, skin tearing against the coarse fibers, but she gritted her teeth and climbed higher, ignoring the sting. At the top, she clung for a heartbeat, staring out over the field, the horizon stretching wide beyond the camp. Something in that view steadied her. She slid down, boots hitting the ground with force, and ran. On dot by the time she finished, her uniform was streaked with mud, her arms raw, her face pale with exhaustion. But she finished. That was what mattered. She stood at the end of the course, hands on her knees, trying to steady her breath. Around her, some recruits laughed still, though not quite as freely. Others avoided her eyes altogether, unsettled by the sight of someone they had dismissed rising to every trial. The instructor stepped forward, his shadow falling over her. His gaze was sharp, his tone clipped. "You think you've proven something?" he asked. She straightened, meeting his stare without flinching. She said nothing, but the fire in her eyes was answer enough. He studied her a moment longer before, barking the next order, turning away as if the matter was settled. Yet something in his voice carried less certainty than before. Night fell with aching muscles and blistered feet. The recruits collapsed into bunks, the air heavy with groans and muttered curses. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the voices of the day still echoing in her head. The laughter was there, sharp and cruel, but beneath it, she heard something else. The silence that had followed when she refused to quit. It was not victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. She closed her eyes and drew in a slow breath. The road ahead would be harder, crueler, designed to break even the strongest among them. She knew this. She welcomed it. For every sneer, every doubt, every smirk that questioned her place here, she carried a single truth within her chest. She had not come to blend into the ranks. She had come to shatter expectations. The bugle's call before dawn wrenched her from sleep. Another day, another gauntlet of trials. As she rose and laced her boots, she caught a recruit, watching her from across the barracks. His grin was gone, replaced with something unreadable curiosity, maybe even caution. She didn't acknowledge it. She didn't need to. The day would speak for itself. Outside, the drill instructor's shadow stretched long against the rising sun. He called them to formation, his voice booming, unrelenting. She stepped into line, shoulders squared, eyes forward, ready. Around her, laughter simmered, waiting for her to stumble again. But she had already learned the rhythm of their doubt. It no longer rattled her. When the command came, and the recruits surged forward once more, she moved with them, not as a shadow, not as an afterthought, but as someone no longer defined by the size of her frame. Each step carried the weight of determination, each breath the promise of something more. And though the records and accolades were still far from reach, the seed had been planted in every watching eye. The girl they had laughed at was not going anywhere. The day ended as it began, with boots striking the dirt and orders cracking the air. But the laughter now carried a trace of unease, as though they sensed what she already knew. They had mistaken smallness for weakness. In time, they would learn the difference. And when that time came, their laughter would not matter at all. The weeks bled together in a rhythm of exhaustion and resolve. Dawn broke with the sound of bugles. Nights ended with aching limbs and restless sleep. And in between came the grind designed to break the body and strip the spirit bare. Every day the recruits were tested. Every day the standard grew harsher. And every day the laughter that had once been so free lost some of its certainty. Still, the doubts lingered, unspoken but sharp, especially when eyes drifted toward her. She carried the weight of those stares, as surely as she carried the rifle slung across her shoulder. But she carried them nonetheless. Her hands no longer looked like the hands she had arrived with. The skin was raw, knuckles split, palms hardened with calluses that burned with every pull of rope or press of steel. Each scar that appeared became a quiet answer to the voices around her, proof written not in words, but in the language of endurance. She no longer thought of herself as small, though she was reminded of it often. Instead, she thought of herself as unyielding. The difference mattered. There were moments when even her strength faltered. A forced march under the punishing sun left her stumbling, the weight of her gear pressing down until her knees threatened to give. The drill instructor's voice lashed through the air, merciless. "If you can't carry it, you don't belong here." The recruits pressed forward, some stealing glances back at her, waiting for the collapse that seemed inevitable. She forced, one foot ahead of the other, her vision tunneling, her breath ragged. The ground wavered beneath her boots, but she refused to fall. When at last the order came to halt, she stood drenched in sweat, swaying but still upright. The smirks faltered, and in their place came a silence edged with something close to respect. Among those who had mocked her most, fiercely, was a broad-shouldered recruit named Carter. He had laughed the loudest on the first day, quick with the jokes and quicker still to place bets on how soon she would quit. Yet even he could not ignore what unfolded before his eyes. One evening, after a drill that left every muscle screaming, he muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Didn't think you'd still be here." His tone carried no warmth, but neither did it hold the cruelty it once had. She did not answer, but inside she recognized it for what it was, the first crack in the wall of doubt that surrounded her. The days grew more grueling, the nights shorter. Sleep became a luxury, food a fleeting comfort snatched between drills. They were pushed to crawl through mud under live fire, to heave themselves over obstacles that seemed designed for failure, to march until their bodies screamed rebellion. Each challenge tested not only muscle but will, and it was here she found her strength burning brightest. While others cursed under their breath or muttered complaints, she moved with a quiet focus, her silence more eloquent than any outburst. That silence unsettled them. It was the silence of someone who would not break. There were times, in the stillness between tasks, when she remembered why she had come. She thought of the names etched in stone, the faces that lived only in memory, and the promise she had made to carry forward what they could not. Those thoughts gave weight to every step, turned every ache into something bearable. She was not here merely to survive training. She was here to honor something greater than herself. The rifle range revealed another truth. Recruits took their positions, the air taut with anticipation. One by one, they fired, a crack of rounds splitting the air. Accuracy mattered, discipline mattered, and failure was not tolerated. When her turn came, some leaned closer, eager for another chance to laugh. She steadied the weapon, breath measured, eyes locked on the target. The first shot struck true. So did the second. And the third. By the time her final round hit dead center, silence spread across the line. No one laughed. The instructor marked her score with a curt nod, his expression giving nothing away, but his eyes lingered again in that quiet way that suggested he had seen something worth remembering. Still, respect was not freely given. The rivalry among recruits simmered, a constant current of competition, sharpened by exhaustion. Carter challenged her openly, pushing harder in runs, forcing the pace in drills, daring her to fall behind. Each time she met his challenge, sometimes only by a step, sometimes by sheer force of will, but never with surrender. The more he pushed, the more she answered, until the sneers faded into something else: acknowledgement. Reluctant though it was, the central trial loomed ahead, spoken of in hushed tones around the barracks, the crucible. The final test, the measure of endurance, leadership, and spirit, where recruits were stripped of comfort and left with nothing but grit to carry them through. It was said to break even the strongest, to reveal who truly belonged and who had only pretended. As whispers spread, eyes drifted toward her again, some with anticipation, others with pity. Few believed she would last the full ordeal. In the days leading to it, the training intensified. each exercise a prelude to the storm that was coming. She threw herself into every task, not because she expected mercy, but because she wanted none. She welcomed the weight, the pain, the exhaustion, each one a rehearsal for the moment when she would be pushed beyond the edge. At night, as others collapsed into uneasy sleep, she lay awake, staring into the darkness, hearing again the laughter that had greeted her on her first day. It no longer stung. It fueled her. The night before the crucible, rain lashed against the barracks roof, a storm raging as if to mark the coming trial. Recruits lay silent, nerves coiled tight, some whispering prayers, others staring into the shadows. She sat at the edge of her bunk, lacing her boots with deliberate care. Across the room, Carter watched her, his usual smirk gone, replaced with something harder to read. For the first time, he spoke without mockery. "Tomorrow decides everything." She met his eyes, gave a single nod, and said nothing. Words were not needed. Tomorrow would speak louder than either of them. When dawn came, gray and unforgiving, the recruits gathered, packs heavy, weapons ready. The drill instructor's voice cut through the air, stripped of all pretense. "This is it. No excuses. No shortcuts. You either make it, or you don't." His eyes swept over them, lingering once more on her. Before turning away, she tightened the strap on her pack, feeling the weight settle across her shoulders. Around her, tension rippled, some recruits pale, others restless, all bracing for what lay ahead. The crucible awaited, and with it, the chance to prove not just endurance, but identity. For her, it was more than a test. It was the moment she had carried in her heart since the first laugh rang out across the field. It was the moment she would answer them all. As the command came to move out, boots struck the earth once more, not in laughter, not in doubt, but in grim determination. The path stretched long and merciless, the sky heavy with storm clouds. She took her place among them, shoulders squared, fire burning steady. Every step forward was a step toward the reckoning that waited. And though no one could see it, deep within herself she knew, the crucible would not break her. It would reveal her. The storm had passed, but the ground still glistened with rain, soft mud clinging to boots as the recruits pressed forward into the teeth of the crucible. Packs weighed them down, rifles cut into shoulders, and every step became a battle of willpower. Sleep was a memory, food a rarity, and the only fuel left was determination. For many, that fire sputtered quickly. For her, it burned brighter than ever. The first trial was endurance miles of terrain that stretched mercilessly across ridges and valleys. Carter surged to the front, his bulk moving like a battering ram through the muck. Others staggered behind, groaning under the weight, their faces gray with exhaustion. She fell in with steady rhythm, smaller strides but relentless, each one precise, controlled, unwavering. Some glanced back, expecting to see her falter, yet she held their pace mile after mile, her breathing sharp but measured. Hunger gnawed at their bellies. Sleep deprivation dulled their minds, but the instructors offered no mercy. Night fell, and still they moved, shadows stumbling in the dark. The air was thick with fatigue, but when a recruit ahead collapsed, her hands were the first to reach out, hauling him up without a word. That silent act rippled through the group, forcing others to match her resolve. Even Carter glanced back, his eyes narrowing with something almost like respect. The obstacle course returned, this time crueler, harsher, timed and watched with merciless eyes. Walls slick with rain rose taller than ever. Ropes sagged heavier with water. Mud sucked at every limb. Her hands bled anew, but she climbed regardless, each pull of her body up the rope a testament to will over flesh. When others hesitated at the wall, she crouched low, offered her knee, and hoisted them up. They had once laughed at her height, her small frame. Now it was that very frame braced beneath their boots, lifting them to victory. Shooting drills followed, their arms trembling from exhaustion, eyes struggling to focus in the dim light. One by one, shots missed wide, frustration mounting. She steadied her weapon, breath ragged but controlled. Each round snapped into the target, grouping tight, precise, unshaken by fatigue. Even the instructors exchanged quiet glances, the disbelief in their eyes slowly giving way to recognition. The final march was the crucible within the crucible. Gear heavier than bone should bear, distance longer than thought could endure. Recruits broke one by one, shoulders sagging, legs buckling, but still she pressed forward. Carter stumbled, his massive frame lurching under the weight. He cursed, nearly fell. Without hesitation, she shifted her pack, slung part of his load across her own, and kept walking. He stared at her in shock, too breathless to speak. The laughter that had once bound him now felt hollow in his chest. Hours bled into each other, the line of recruits moving like phantoms through the dawn. When the base finally came into view, figures in uniform waiting to mark the end, something surged within her chest, not relief, but resolve. She straightened her back, tightened her grip on the straps, and marched those final steps with a defiance that no weight could bend at the gates. The records were tallied, scores marked, names etched into the ledger of achievement. She had not just endured, she had surpassed. Fastest time on the endurance course, highest accuracy on the range, most pull-ups in succession, her small frame trembling yet refusing to give way until she had shattered the standing mark. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with disbelief. The instructors who had doubted, the recruits who had laughed, even Carter, who had mocked each one, now stood in the shadow of what she had done. The drill instructor stepped forward, the same man whose gaze had judged her from the very beginning. His face was stone, but his voice, when it came, carried something rare respect. You've done more than anyone expected, more than most thought possible. You've written your name into these records, and no one can take that from you. He paused, his eyes narrowing, not with doubt now but pride. From this day forward, they will remember. She stood at attention, mud streaking her face, uniform torn, body trembling with exhaustion, but her eyes steady. She did not smile, did not weep, did not seek their approval. The silence of her strength spoke louder than any cheer. Carter stepped closer, his voice low, almost reverent. Guess I was wrong about you. She turned her head just enough to meet his gaze, gave the faintest nod, and looked forward again. It was not about proving him wrong. It was about proving herself right. The laughter that had once followed her like a shadow was gone. In its place stood something weightier, harder. One, respect. She had broken every record, but more than that, she had broken the chains of doubt that bound her. She was no longer the girl they had mocked. She was a Marine dot, and as the flag rose against the morning sky, her heart burned with quiet fire. They had called her too small, too weak, not enough. But in the end, she had not just endured. She had become the measure by which others would now be judged.